this thread about get out, stay out of New York for July 4th, and Ladislaus was kind of talking about the apocalypse, and he was talking about he's also bringing in Nostradamus predictions, which that's very. I mean, I looked into those. My parents looked into those, like
Mm-hmm.
30 years ago or more.
Yeah.
But a lot of it turned out to not be really very valid. I mean, they're very subjective. They're very mysterious, so you can almost interpret them into anything. But
Sure.
anyhow, the point is, there's some other prophecies talking about a great city, a great flame leaping up and destroying the city, and all this. And there's this talk about, is New York going to get false flagged during this 250th anniversary of the USA,
Sure.
celebration Trump's doing.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt it's an auspicious kind of window, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not the place I'd want to be on
Okay.
July 4th. But
So,
that having been
other
said,
topic.
as people are watching this,
Mhm.
I don't want to be accused of being one of the people calling for something, because that could
Right.
age very poorly. But I
Sure.
guess my response to him was, are we in the middle of the apocalypse or not? Because if this thing, the great city of Babylon, is fallen, okay, that sounds like New York. I gotcha. But why would just one thing in the middle of the apocalypse come true in 2026 when
Right.
nothing before it or after it? Or are we in the middle of it?
Right.
And so I think it might just be a good thing just to kind of go over some of the details and just see, is it what should we expect? What is the nature of the apocalypse and its predictions? What are we likely to see, and are we even beginning the process? Has the apocalypse kicked off at all yet? Kind of a
Right.
question. That might be the title. Is has the apocalypse kicked off to any degree?
Okay. Now you had mentioned one or two topics. Was that
Well,
kind of?
the other was, which was older, from like a
Mhm.
couple days previous. I was thinking about like finishing of like how when you have cattle, you raise them, you grow them, and then you do the finishing, where
Right.
you kind of finish them off with
Yep.
grass or something for the last 6 months or whatever. Well, the finishing of your adult children. So like you raised them to 18, but now
Right.
you have to do a certain amount of finishing work to get
Sure.
them established.
Yeah. They say,
How
in
do
fact,
you
they had a finishing school, right? You used to go to finishing school sometimes.
Yeah, so it's like just the topic of what do you do? What should the kid do? What should
Sure.
the parents do? Who should pay for what? That kind of thing. Because there's a lot of opinions on it and a lot of mistakes. The baby boom generation comes to mind. They're kind of notorious for being very um, insistent on their kids being independent when they turn 18. Like you hear apocryphal stories of kids having their suitcases packed at the door on the morning of their 18th birthday, and their
Mhm.
parents telling them be out by tonight or something like that. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's ever happened. It probably has a couple places. I
Oh,
know
sure.
my dad said he got kicked out when he was 18,
Yeah.
but and actually he was a baby boomer though, so
Right.
that would be the greatest generation guilty of that. But the point is, we can reject that kind of behavior, that culture, and then you're still left with nothing. Okay, what do we do? What am I supposed to do? We don't
Right.
want to just let kids stay at home living the neat NEET lifestyle that's neither
Sure.
employed, education, or in training. In other
Mhm.
words, just hanging around, goofing off.
Well, yeah.
But we also
I
don't
mean,
want to
that's
throw them into the deep end.
right. And you could actually, there's no reason you have to disown or shame the previous way. I think there's, something praiseworthy about it insofar as that was a different world, right? If you weren't actually ready to do something by 18, over 100 years ago, there was something wrong with you.
Yeah.
That's not the case now for numerous reasons. It's not the least of which is the parenting style of, the people like myself who are raised by the boomers. The parenting style is just pathetic, right? You can't expect them to have it all together. The education, the job market, the parenting style, all that comes together to make the old way of doing a lot of different things, inapplicable. Well, welcome to the Inquisitors. I'm Gladius Veritatis, being joined again today by Matthew. And it is a warm, sunny day here in Maine. I don't know, something like mid to upper 80s. You know, we're surviving. At least there's a little breeze. That's the X factor, actually, pretty much all the time around here. If it's hot and stagnant and you don't have AC, then it gets a little bit gross. But thankfully, the well water here is really cold. So if you're in a pinch, just douse yourself and you'll feel fine. Today we're going to talk about maybe a couple different things. First is what we're going to style basically finishing. There used to be something called finishing schools, right? You raise your children and you raise them to leave the house, to live a life of their own, but what different sorts of finishing touches to the training and upbringing are very useful in 2026, right? Some of the things that they would have even covered in finishing school, say 60 years ago, they'd be useful, but much less so, right? Knowing certain things about cultural interactions, societal interactions. I'm not saying that those aren't useful, but at this point, this late in the hour, late in the game, it's important to have some very practical skills. But I'll pass it over to Matthew and get his thoughts on what he envisions for the discussion.
So yeah, the topic of finishing your adult children. I know I'm trying to reach for a good word. I compare it to if you're raising cattle or something. Sure. You raise them, you feed them a certain way up to a certain size.
Right. Grass-fed cows are often finished with corn.
Although what's better is to finish them with grass. And then,
right, no, I got you. But even a lot of the ones out there, they can claim that they're grass-fed. They grass feed them all the way to the end, and boom.
Yeah, because at the end, there's certain things you can't do the finishing during the middle. So, for example, your children, you can't teach them about those who run the world, some of the ugly, evil things out there in the world, some of the ugly truths about the way the world works, men and women, dating, or I should, for Catholics, it would be courtship, but just some certain things you can't start on that until they're able to receive it. So like 16, maybe, until they're a certain age, you can't just get that in when they're in their early teens. Some things have to wait for the end, or some things have to wait for them to be of full maturity where they can go out and work, hold any kind of job, go to college, all those kind of things. You have to get them established in the world, and that has to happen at the end of your raising them. Right. So there's a lot of topics, and these are the kind of things I think traditional Catholics should concern themselves with, which is summed up in the CathInfo subforum, Catholics living in the modern world. Yeah. So all those topics that concern us as Catholics trying to just live a normal life out here in the messed up modern world of the 21st century. Whereas so many other topics are academic, or they're kind of a waste of time for laymen to really discuss. They don't really affect us. But these topics, this is one of the topics that affects everyone with children. Sure. How to treat your adult children, what to expect of them, what should they do on their own, what should they be happy to do, how should they help out, and to what degree, what should parents do for their children? Because there's the topic of closing ranks. When you're in a war against your own future, they're trying to eliminate our future by destroying our kids' ability to buy a house and get married and hold a good job and everything. You're risking them not being able to get established, get married, and have children. Your own legacy is at stake here. So perhaps one of the things we should consider is we need to close ranks, defend ourselves, stick together, and help each other. Give your kids some time at home to save up money for a down payment on a house, that kind of thing. But on the other hand, we've seen all the evils that result in giving adult children too much freedom to be basically have a second childhood, only a better one, because this childhood, your brain is fully developed. You have money coming in. You can do much more. You can go traveling. You can do more advanced things all day.
You get a lot more trouble.
Yeah, a lot more trouble. You're not just playing with little kid toys anymore. It's much you're much more useful because you have all the powers of a young, strong adult. Only if you have no responsibilities to spend those powers on,
Right.
yeah, you
Or
can get in a lot of
the
trouble.
judgment of a child, it gets a little bit messy.
And also just the topic, there's so much to this. I wrote up I think a pretty comprehensive post about it, kind of a good outline on Cath Info on the topic. But there's a lot of things to keep in mind.
Yeah, feel free to reference it as we go, because although we're closed today and I'm off, pretty much all the way up until then, I've been doing, long days. So I'm off and away from Cath Info for days, if not weeks at a time. So.
And, even women, of course, the men have to be established so they can have families, but the women, they might need a kind of a nest egg to help, help their husband buy a house. And, and I don't want, when I talk about raising your children and all this kind of stuff, I don't want to get autobiographical too much.
Sure.
Just for various reasons. I mean, I'll mention a few things like talking about bringing a dowry. My wife, she had a career of sorts. I mean, she had a degree in accounting and she had a job. It wasn't super high paying, but she also didn't have a lot of student debt because she actually belonged going to college. In other words, she was the valedictorian, for example, of her class. So she had very high grades. She got a lot of good scholarships. And so she didn't pay that much to get her 5-year accounting degree, which she did in 4 years, by the way. And so, in other words, that kind of screamed out, this kid, it isn't a bad idea for this child to spend time in college as long as it doesn't cost too much because they're learning valuable skills, accounting and so forth that could be useful in the future to her husband. And it turned out to be very useful. To this day, she still does the taxes. And I used to have a home business for many years and she helped with that. I mean, it was very useful and she's very good at, helping keep the books, as it were. Yeah. So, but what she brought was things like she bought a new vehicle. And it was very practical. It held up to 5 people. So for the first several years of our married life, we didn't have to go into debt for a car, stuff like that. And so that would be stuff that a young lady would want to consider, to prepare for marriage.
And save up, because I mean, you would. It's not just I'm marrying somebody and they come with a bonus, as it were, like a dowry, right? If it's acquired, especially through industry, frugality, it also attaches to it really positive sorts of labels as far as just making.
Okay, so it looks like we're back. Sorry about that interruption. Of course, that'll all be edited out.
Right. Sorry to each other, isn't it?
So as far as to help understand what I'm trying to say about this, let's use a slight analogy. Sure. We all know that poorer people, like poor nations, third world countries, they are often more devout, more pious, and just have more faith than richer countries. I mean, are you all familiar with that? I'm sure most people have heard that in many cases. It's like being without, having to do actually without and suffer want makes you more dependent on God, and it kind of puts your soul in a better place. And it's one of those sad facts of human nature. It's like, it's a shame that man can't be well-to-do, have everything he needs, and also be dependent on God and love God with all his heart. But it seems like it's impossible. It seems like you can only have one or the other. It's a sad fact.
The few exceptions throughout history stand out precisely because they're so remarkable, right?
Yeah, like so if you have a rich person who used their wealth really well to build up the church and to help his fellow man, it's very rare because so often and our Lord spoke of this. This isn't my idea. I'm getting this from Jesus himself. He said that it's easier for a rich man to pass through the eye of a needle than it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter in the kingdom of heaven.
King St. Louis, right? St. Louis was an exception. St. Stephen.
Again, the exception proves the rule. It does not disprove the rule. And so keeping in mind that sometimes human nature it's sad, it's painful, but it's unavoidable. Now let's apply that to a young man. If he is forced out of his house or forced into thrown into the deep end, and he'll be given an opportunity to mature the rest of the way into manhood. He'll have by facing some adversity, he
Sure. Real life
becomes more
events.
resilient. He becomes more independent, right? In fact, there's lots of videos all over YouTube talking about Gen X, which is my generation and yours, how all that adversity and being kind of thrown out to be on our own, even as children, a lot of our peers were latchkey kids, for example. I wasn't personally, but a lot of my peers were apparently. And just the way that our parents raised us to just go outside and play all day, get into our own fights, deal with our own conflicts, and no one's going to tell you that you're good looking if you're not. You're not. No one's going to help you make friends. You just got to deal with life. Learn all the hard lessons by yourself. All that kind of stuff. But it's like there's no free lunch. There's no easy path because we suffered through all those things. As a generation, most members of our generation, we ended up being very resilient, very independent, good problem solvers. We're very thick skin, et cetera, et cetera. And then you see later generations who maybe had an easier childhood, but guess what? You don't get something for free. You can't have the output or the end result of a tough childhood without having that tough childhood. Again, it's sad that it has to be that way in this fallen world post-original sin, but that's the way it seems to be. And I've seen over and over that even the people who complain about how their parents kicked them out at 18, they end up being successful, responsible, independent men.
They learned how to swim.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. I don't like it either, but it's kind of hard. I'm not saying that's what I'm promoting. I'm just saying I want to acknowledge that truth because it does seem to be true that it's one of those things that you almost have to deal with as a member of, the human race after the fall, which is, almost all of us. Only Adam and Eve got to see what it was like before.
Well, I mean, look, kiddie pools, water wings, they all have their purpose, but at some point in the process, you have to launch out, and I'm not saying you want to launch somebody involuntarily, but, that first time, it's usually in the actual pool scenario, it is a little bit involuntary. Somebody just helps give you that extra push. And then, that process is often what can lead to just continuously launching out into the deep voluntarily in the kinds of ways that actually leads to like profound growth, whether intellectual or spiritual or whatever, or all the above, right? No risk it, no biscuit. That applies for all things. So you don't want somebody to be too cautious and sheepish and never want to launch out either, right?
And that could affect things like vocations because trying out a vocation is quite risky. You risk setting back your job progress, your career.
Yeah. And the prime of your life, you need to go spend at least a couple years in an institution. You have to value that for what you're going to get out of it.
And just the fact that it's an adventure, I definitely remember being kind of excited because it was unknown and kind of wanting it. But see, if I had a different childhood, I might be completely different. In fact, I hate to get autobiographical, but I do have an example of where I was more scared. It was when I was 12. I was not yet ready for an adventure. My great uncle, Tom Nelson, offered to pay my way or to host me or whatever to go to St. Mary's, Kansas, to go to their to be like a boarder student at their school. I don't know if it was for high school or middle school. Well, let's see, I was 12, so probably middle school and high school, and probably maybe college after that. Now, in hindsight, seeing how some of the St. Mary's people turned out, I don't know if it would have been the best for me. I mean, God seems to have dealt with with the way things went instead just fine. I wouldn't want to change anything, obviously, but I remember being kind of more scared of it because it was so far away and so unknown. I was not ready for an adventure. And so imagine if I had that same attitude of the 12-year-old boy when I was 18. And, I guarantee you there are 18-year-olds who have that same mindset, who are interiorly, at least emotionally, still that 12-year-old boy. They're as afraid to leave mama or to go out into the great unknown and have an adventure, whether it's the military, joining the Foreign Legion, going to the seminary, moving across the country, moving to another country. Pick your adventure, but you got to do some kind of an adventure, even if it's just moving out of your house. I think a man should want that. And I also know someone in my extended family. When he was like 16, he wanted his own place. Sure. He even went. His family had an outbuilding on the property. It was kind of like a garage or shed kind of a thing. It had electricity, but no water or bathroom. Yeah. And it was kind of. I've actually seen it. Of course, decades later, it's pretty best. It's falling apart now, but just the idea that he wanted out of his brother's. He only had one brother, but he wanted out of his room just so he could have his own. Have some privacy and be on his own a little bit. He was willing to go do that. And see, I think that's natural for a boy to want to plunge out on his own and make his own way and make a name for himself and, establish himself and kind of separate himself from just an appendage of his family or separate himself from his father a little bit. You know what I mean? I think that's the genesis of the whole teenage rebellion thing. It's the teen is trying to find himself and trying to discover who he is. Not exactly a clone of his father, but maybe similar, but I'm going to do a few things a little different. And he's trying to distinguish himself. And I think some of that is somewhat healthy. I mean, I don't think God meant
you're darn right it is. That's why they want to suppress it and basically have everybody live this like endless adolescence where nobody has the foresight, guts, and desire to, basically step away from Big Brother, right? I mean, the endless adolescence is precisely what plays into the techno gulag. Everybody's afraid to step outside that. So, I mean, there's definitely a very healthy aspect to what you're talking about, and it's something I think that should be cultivated if you have young men in your charge.
Yeah, because just for example, say there was some kind of a dystopia going on and you needed to fight against it, like they were doing in Britain with those cameras all over the neighborhoods, or those parking cameras and stuff where you had to pay taxes just to drive your car around or whatever. And people were spray painting them, damaging them, vandalizing them. And actually I heard that no one was reporting. No one would come forward.
Yeah. There's a lot of for what it's worth, there's a lot of precious metals in those. What you're going to do with that is your business. But
But see, to do that, what if you're one of these soy boys or one of these kind of grown-up man children who are not really a man, and you've kind of replaced your parents with the government, and so you just give the government some money and you give them a certain amount of power and you expect them to take care of you the way your parents used to. Yes, you're giving them money, or like say you give the landlord a bunch of money, you take care of all utilities and everything, keeping everything running. I just want to throw my laundry in the washer and hit go and call my DoorDash and have my food delivered, and I just want to live like a child. Of course, they're working for a living and they're paying money, but it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. For the most part, they are almost pretending to themselves that their parents are still taking care of them. And everything's very predictable. There's no unknown. Whereas, what if you were to disrupt that? Like, for example, if you're in some kind of a dystopia where you're being watched all the time, some people might want to have accidents happen to those cameras. Well, what if you're a person who would be terrified of the notion of what would happen if the cameras all went away? What would we do? We'd have to take care of ourselves. We'd have to take care of our own security. We'd have to take care of our own.
We'd have to get a life, a real life. No.
You don't want to be in in that situation where that would be terrible to you and scary. You want
definitely not
to move toward that world where we are back in control. We think that's fun. We think that's a good thing.
And if you are a young man, right? This isn't the ultimate consideration, but just consider those two approaches to the situation and which would be more attractive, not just to a potential spouse, but even to, if you have a spouse now and who's dependent upon you, what kind of confidence are you going to give them in your ability to do what needs to be done, right? Because that's what we have to do as men.
Yeah. So, and that's part of the other thing. I mentioned a lot of points, and one of them was, how is the adult child spending their time and money while they're still at home with their parents? So obviously, if they're going to college, well, that's a big chunk of their time. That they're pretty much
Sure.
good for time there if
Right.
they're actively working towards some kind of a degree. And of course, assuming that they actually have a plan what they're going to do with that degree. You know, I think if the child was studying something ridiculous that's not going to help them, the parents need to step in and say, you can't do that because you're never going to have a job if you pursue that philosophy.
I mean, frankly, the world oil situation alone puts a lot of these kinds of things into a certain flux that was not the case even a couple years ago, 5 years ago. You know, you have now the AI encroachment and the oil and all byproducts thereof, things coming together where it's, you want to make sure you're studying something that is useful and that it truly grows the mind and has.
And speaking of the oil crisis, that's another aspect is there's what we would do in an ideal situation, like even 10 years ago. And there's what we should do now, because as I alluded to earlier, there's the aspect of closing ranks and not coddling your children, but you don't want to destroy their chances of getting established. So, for example, if you kick them out of the house at 18, well, they're going to have to spend every dime they have on some kind of rent, and they're never going to save up for a home, for example. So wouldn't it be better for your sake and theirs to allow them to save up that money for a down payment so they could buy and own property, which is kind of the beginning of a legacy. So they can have a family, they can raise children, they'll own that house. And then later, if they, get canceled or they get involuntarily retired at 50, for example, no particular reason I'm thinking of that, at least they'll have a house paid off that they won't have to worry about ending up on the street. It's very helpful and handy to have at least a roof over your head.
Sure.
So we have to be careful about not just knee-jerk or simplistically going by rules that were done 50 or 100 years ago. We need to look at the situation today and be realistic about it. We have to keep the principles. For example, an adult should not be able to have another childhood. They should not be able to live like they did when they're 6 or 7. That's over. When you're able-bodied and 18 or older, you obviously have more abilities now. You have strength. Either you're studying or you're working or you're even if you're going to college and working a part-time job, you probably can help out a little bit during the week around the house. And if you have any kind of money or spending money or personal money, you need to take care of at least your own personal effects, some of your own expenses and such. Because your parents probably aren't made of money. And again, it depends on the parents. If the parents are doctors or the dad's a doctor or something, maybe he doesn't need the money as much. But even then, would he want to spoil his child or his sons? That might not be advisable. Even if you love your son a lot, then you really don't want to spoil him because it would be counterproductive. It would be counterintuitive. It seems like the backwards way to do it. But if you love your child, you don't want to coddle them too much and have them end up being some kind of a bum because you never gave them any challenge. You never challenged them to grow any further. And
the world's got enough of the bums,
Yeah, and I think there's a special role fathers have to play because obviously God gave every person, at least at the beginning, every person has two parents. Now, sometimes there are unfortunate cases where you don't know or haven't met one of the two parents, either due to death or due to divorce or whatever, or a profligate lifestyle, of the mother, and you don't know your dad, and that causes great damage to the children, because again, we all know that a child learns about God and learns about authority by looking at their father, who they see. They learn about God, who they don't see, by how their father treats them. And so, yes, we've all heard of daddy issues, and believe me, daddy issues are a real thing. Just
they're real.
Go online, you can see all the cases of
important relationships in your life, right?
And it does actually messes up men as much as women. It just messes them up differently and in different ways. But fatherless behavior is really a thing. And in fact, the statistics bear out that children with just a father don't do as well as two-parent households, but they're much closer to the two-parent household than to the single mother. The single mother household does by far the worst.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
And it kind of makes sense because what are you lacking with a single mother household? You're lacking all the finishing work, all the tough love, all the strong guidance of the father toward the daughter, laying down the law about you can't wear that. Here's what you got to know about men. No, you can't do that. And the same with men. No, you can't goof off. No, you can't spend all your money on video games or whatever.
You're missing,
I'm gonna charge you rent. I'm going to make you move
what
out.
you'll need to make it in the world, right?
Yeah,
you're missing what you want.
Yeah, and of course the father has to be prudent. Not all sons are the same. I guess what the father has to do is apply himself to the situation. What does my son need right now from me to become a good, strong, independent man? And so in some cases it would require acts of tough love, up to and including kicking him out of the house in some cases. Not in all cases, but I think if the son is keeping bad company, if he's joined a motorcycle gang, if he's wasting all his money if he's doing any kind of drugs, there's times when, okay, you're out of the house. But who's going to do that? The father. In almost every case, it would take the father to have enough strength to make that move, because the mothers are, God bless them, and Bishop Williamson talked like this too. God love them. Women are sympathetic. They're bleeding hearts. How many times have you seen? How many times have you seen a criminal? There's men who have killed several people in the courtroom, and the mother still can't hold anything against her son. Oh, he didn't mean it. Oh, he's a good boy. Oh, he's a good boy. He didn't do nothing. You see it all the time. A mother just can't take that step to be rational.
All children benefit from that sort of blind devotion. Now whether it's, it doesn't have to be a murder scenario or some guy who's killing people in the courtroom, just regular folks. Like, we benefit from both the makeup of the mother and the makeup of the father, right?
Yep. But I think
no love like a mother's love, and thank God for it. Otherwise, the world would be a mess and we'd all be in a lot of trouble.
Yes, and if you were to chart it out on a graph, which of those two things you need more, it would be a curve. It would not be the same every year of your life.
Sure.
Boys under 5, they need their mother more. They're more fragile. They need that unconditional love. They need that emotional support and everything. But as they get older, especially once they hit their teens, the father becomes invaluable to finishing them, to bringing them the rest of the way into manhood. Because as my favorite Latin saying, nemo dat quod non habet, no one gives what he doesn't have. A woman cannot give to her son manhood. She does not have it. She cannot give it to her sons. Only a man can lead his son the rest of the way into manhood, which is why I think fathers are uniquely qualified to kind of head up that finishing work, especially on sons, to guide them into the world, because he remembers what it was like as a boy. He remembers being young usually, and he knows what needs to be done. And that's why in a good family, you usually find a father. If you find a man who turned out right, you look, and he usually had a father. That includes, doesn't matter what the nation, what the race, usually if they have a father, the child turns out so much better.
Sure.
And so the question is the details. The real question is what things to consider. It's really a complicated thing. Like with everything, you have to consider so many different things. How much is he making? Is he going to college?
Sure.
Does he have a career already? What's he doing with his time and his money? How much do the parents have? In other words, how much do they need the support? Do they need support just with helping out, or do they need financial help as well?
Sure.
Also, is it a boy or a girl? Because obviously you're going to treat men and women differently. You're not trying to push your daughter out to be independent, for example, the way you would a son, because actually that would kind of go counterintuitive to what you want for her. You want her to kind of go from her father's house to her husband's house, ideally.
Right.
But again, if she goes against, if she wants to, if she's wasting all her time on TikTok, if she's joined the world, if she's keeping bad company, et cetera, you might have to wield the tough love with her as well. But assuming she's not becoming a black sheep and she is respectful, I think, And again, I think the children should spontaneously want to help out as soon as they can. If they're not busy with, if they're not too busy to help at all, they should be helping somewhat. And if they have all this money coming in, I mean, considering what the parents sacrificed for them, I think they should be willing to help out in return. Because again, it depends on the parents, because not all parents sacrifice the same amount for their children.
Sure.
We all hear about the horror stories, and even into the present day, they're not all the bad parents out there are baby boomers. Surprise, surprise. Some of parents just put their kids right in public school, and they want to be rid of them as soon as possible. Maybe they both work jobs. Maybe it started out innocent enough, but then they like the lifestyle. They keep working 2 jobs. They put their kids in daycare, then they put them in public school, and then they have them do after school programs and activities. And they just don't spend a lot of time with their kids, and they haven't really sacrificed that much for them. Now, still, there's still a debt of obligation even to such parents. I mean, they're still your parents. Nevertheless, I think some parents who did a really good job, who went out of their way, maybe they homeschooled you, maybe they lived in an area which was better for raising a family. They didn't move to the big city where they could get a better job and make more money. Maybe they prioritized other things like their family and giving you a good place to be raised. They gave you a stable household where you weren't moving every 5 years. Maybe they gave you maybe the dad gave you the children a stay-at-home mom. That's expensive. You got to work harder. You both have to put in a lot of effort to be able to afford one income and be able to support a family on one income.
Not the easiest trick to pull off these days, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, so as a child, if you look at your parents and saw, yeah, they did that, you have more to be thankful for, more reason for gratitude, not just that they brought you into the world, because a lot of people brought kids into the world, but they did a minimal amount after that. They did the bare minimum. Let's say good traditional Catholic parents, a lot of them are making great sacrifices today for their children. Both the mom and the dad. Even the mom hopefully doesn't go to work outside the home, but she's working inside the home, and she's trying to have a whole environment for her children and her husband. She's trying to garden, and she's trying to maybe raise some animals. She's doing all these things to give a rich, meaningful upbringing for her boys and girls to grow up.
But I mean, one or both of them, when you're out in the world, right? Everybody holds things differently, right? I mean, a lot of times you will face ridicule, spoken or unspoken. You go to the grocery store, and people will think and sometimes say, even audibly, maybe not like right to your face, but like, oh my God, are those all their kids? So there's a constant, need for, fortitude, trust in divine providence, in a way and to a degree that is even above and beyond and would, any kind of recent era, you know what I mean? Just in terms of what you have to put up with to achieve what you're trying to achieve.
You remind me of another thing, the siblings. A lot of traditional Catholic families, they're having all the children God sends. And so you, as a boy or a girl in this family, your dad and mom gave you a bunch of siblings. That's a great blessing for you. You didn't have to be alone or just with 1 or 2 siblings. If you have just 2 kids, one's a boy, one's a girl, you're effectively an only child. I mean, once you hit 5 or 6, boys and girls kind of, they do their own thing. And
it's
so
also, siblings will very quickly and infallibly strip you of any delusion that you're the center of the universe, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's just because a lot of people do grow up in a single family or a single child household or 2 maybe. And I think that's part of why they're so warped, right? Because it's the whole idea that, I might be the center of the universe is preposterous. But I think it only holds any sway in those modern, artificially small households. If you've got a big, healthy family, it's just like, okay, every single day, every day, from the first couple minutes you're in the world, it is clear, you are not the center of the universe, which is a healthy thing.
You're right. So normally you want your kids, the welfare of your children should come first, but it's the children, not you, because there's a big difference between the children and you. Whereas if you only have 1 or 2 kids, those are almost the same thing. See the problem there?
Sure.
And but now, of course, the kid's not going to be grateful. Oh, thank you for putting me in my place and not letting me be the center of the universe. Maybe they'll thank you someday for that, but they should thank you much quicker or much sooner in their life. They can see the benefit of, I have a bunch of brothers and or sisters, and I'm not alone, because that took a lot of pain and suffering and doing without and a lot of effort on the part of both the mother and the father. And so again, I hate to keep criticizing the baby boomers, but it's kind of a fact that the baby boomers, there's very rarely a family from that generation who had more than 4 children. If you had 4 children as a baby boomer, you had a large family.
Picture, right? Birth control enters the picture. Almost everybody, at least in the so-called civilized world, starts making use of it in some way, shape, or form.
Yes, but what I find interesting as a person who grew up traditional Catholic, I don't know of any baby boomers who had more than 4 children, even among traditional Catholics. So I presume the best. I presume they were using periodic continence, also known as NFP or the rhythm method or whatever. I assume they weren't using artificial birth control. But first of all, a lot of the Novus Ordo Catholics were. I mean, I hear, I've met Novus Ordo Catholics. Oh, yeah. I saw in my parents. I saw once in my parents' room the little disc thing with the little sections in it and the little pills in it. You know, it's a fact. So many Novus Ordo Catholics just went on birth control.
Sure.
But even among the serious traditional Catholics, I only know of I think one family I knew that had, I think, 5. Maybe it was 6. I think it was 5. But there was one at my chapel who had 8, and they were unusual. They were super unusual. Everyone else, it was the usual, but it's like the culture itself would have freaked out so bad, and the baby boomers were so reluctant to go against the culture that they just, I don't know, whether they just, I mean, I'm not even accusing them of NFP because on go on Cath Info, there's some people who firmly believe that NFP is a mortal sin in all cases. Let's just say you could at least assume they just practiced some kind of continence. Because you can just go a couple years, sleeping in separate rooms or whatever. That's always licit. So,
I mean, the other thing to keep in mind too is that all these people came of age and lived out their adult lives within a world where pretty much nobody was questioning the medical establishment the way they are since, say, 2020. And so, for example, I'm pretty sure my mother never used birth control, but she did have 3 kids and then a couple of miscarriages. And then I think they did maybe like there was something wrong with her uterus. Maybe they took it out. I don't know the details. Bottom line is certain procedures may have taken place for a lot of these people that were ill-advised or unnecessary, but they didn't know that insofar as like everybody just trusted the white coats. They know what they're talking about. Course,
yes, that is a good point. I'll bring up the topic of C-sections in America. It's been
which has become like the norm, hasn't it?
It's much more so now, but even like when I was being born in the 70s, there was a lot of ignorance already in the medical establishment on how to birth a baby. Right. And so women would end up doing an emergency C-section, and back then it was once a C-section, always a C-section. Which that's going to limit your family. And in my opinion, that would be one of the cases where it would be licit for a for a couple to use the rhythm method. If they can only have, you can only have so many C-sections. Right. Each one is an actual risk to your life. And, I know some people think, no, you just got to be celibate. Okay, well, that's easier said than done. If you tell it to the person, okay? Let's just say if this is your situation, I advise you to see a priest about it. Don't listen to people online because half of them don't know what they're talking about. Okay, really, a lot of them don't know what they're talking about. But let's just say that it causes very real problems and challenges when the medical establishment has lost the art of successfully delivering a baby. I mean, they don't even know what overdue is anymore. They think a baby's overdue who's just fine. They freak out if the baby's 1 week overdue. Right. I mean, I read somewhere, and this is when I was, like 15 years ago or so, I read that the average white woman delivers her baby at 41 weeks, 4 days, or something like that. That was the average. So why is it that a white woman who's 1 week overdue is considered overdue? Because the overall average is 40 weeks? What do I care about the overall average for Asians, blacks, Eskimos, and whites if my wife is white? Why wouldn't I be focused on that average? Is this some kind of a treat everyone the same simplistic nonsense? That's what strikes me as. And so that's what I mean. We had to discover, midwives. They're kind of making a comeback again in the younger generations who are willing to question the way things have been done lately. So, and now they're much more willing to do what's called a VBAC, basically a normal birth after a cesarean birth. Yeah. And it can be done successfully. Oh, sure. I can definitely tell you that's the case. But again, back in the boomers' days, that wasn't really an option. Then no one really gave you that. Also, my other understanding is the way they cut the woman open for a C-section is totally different today versus back then. Nevertheless, I know of one traditional family. They had their first C-section. They had all of their other C-section. I think it was after number 6. They had some kind of complications, and the woman lost her uterus. So no more babies now for her. She has 6 children, and she's all done having kids.
It's just sad. I mean, honestly, the safest course at this point is don't go near any hospital.
That's something. And this is one of the truths we have to promote is we need to understand what's wrong with the medical establishment.
And I would not send any child to her because her understanding of she's not dumb, right? She's a very intelligent woman, but she's been trained through the system. Went to Hopkins medical school, which everybody in the world thinks is great, but it's like, do you have any idea how closely that's tied to the military? But anyway, long story short, she's a white coat. She and I obviously don't talk about any of these things because I don't buy any of it. It's either a question of something where there's ignorance involved, but a lot of it's malice. A lot of they suppressed an awful lot of things that were good and the knowledge of those things, and introduced a lot of things that are just a bunch of modern hogwash and jargon that's meant to hoodwink people so they'll participate in the mass poisoning, for lack of a better way to put it.
And let's just say a lot of people were hoodwinked about many things, and it's never too late until you're dead. There's always time to turn around and to make it right in some way. Obviously, if you're 60 or 70 and you discovered, I was hoodwinked about this, I should have had more children. Well, you obviously can't do that.
Sure, but you can encourage others.
Yes, and because of the situation you placed yourself in, you probably had less children to raise and take care of. You probably had more time to focus on your career and such. So you probably have more money now. So maybe you can be the pillar of your church, pillar of your traditional chapel. Really help your priest out and help your chapel because
help out a couple of young cats at your church who are good young men, but who are obviously facing a world that's way more formidable than you were entering when you were a young man. Maybe give them some pointers, maybe give them some contacts for work, maybe give them a few bucks. Like if you think they're responsible and they're not going to waste the money, give them some money, or whatever, pay for a fix on their car. Like there's any number of ways you can help.
And I feel like I don't need to say that because I can see a lot of them are. Sure. I've been to so many traditional chapels, and I wish I had a dime for every time one of the head people, one of the the coordinator or the the people the guy that leads the rosary or the guys that serve or the guys that all the volunteers. You find out they have 2 kids. They're moved. They're not Catholic anymore. Or they're just Novus Ordo. And it's like, they just kind of, they drifted. They just kind of did the thing like everybody else. And then at some point they realized they needed tradition and they came to tradition and, they did the best they could at that point.
Sure.
But see, I guess what I'd like to emphasize is all those people who now are older and they have, a lot of money because of their smaller families and such. They have all this money and they're very generous, but let's not forget that those younger families who are having large families and don't have money, let's not ignore them either. Let's acknowledge that, they're both doing their best, because that young family really doesn't have a choice. It's not like,
Oh yeah,
well, here you are, a traditional Catholic. Well, you could either be stupid and ignore what you were taught and go go focus on your career and then be rich and then support your church, or you can have a big family and be poor. You can't really choose. You got to do the right thing, right? At least that's how I experienced it.
mm-hmm.
So just because you're doing your best doesn't mean that your children can follow your path that you did. They have to do it the right way. You can't just hide the truth from them so they can not have the truth. You know what I mean? They have to do the first choice, what God wants from them as his first choice. But again, back to the original conversation, those who did go through all that trouble and made all those sacrifices, both in terms of where you're going to plop down, having a big enough house, maybe even some land, which isn't cheap, so that you can run and play and not get in trouble with your neighbors and not get in trouble with the cops because you were being a kid outside, things like that. That takes a lot of sacrifice and a lot of money. And just having all those siblings that you got to have fun with, your parents did a lot. And so now here we are in 2026. Some of you might have younger children. Some of you might have kind of a middle-sized family. Some of you might have an older family where your kids are half grown up and half still at home, or some of you might be empty nesters. We're all in different stages of life. But we have to ask ourselves, what should we do both for the parents and for the children? What's ideal for both? What's the best thing for both of them? Because I'm not out to just look after the parents and what's good for them, because that's kind of what people accuse the boomers of doing. Have you ever heard the phrase, I got mine, or the phrase pulling up the ladder after they climb up? I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to make that mistake. God forbid, far from me be that path. However, I also don't want to make any stupid mistakes of coddling my children and ending up, I want them to be successful and get married and have children of their own, so I'm going to coddle him, and then he stays a man-child and doesn't grow the rest of the way into manhood, and then I never have grandchildren. See, that would be counterproductive to take that path. So I don't want that either. So what I want is, what would a good Catholic do given the circumstances of the world, the very real truth of the world, including house prices being ridiculous? I mean, you can't even support, you can't have a minimum wage job and support yourself anymore. I mean, people make jokes and they're kind of cynical about how a boomer, when they back in the 70s, they could work a minimum wage job almost. And it was quite easy to get a decent job, and they could support a family on that, one income. They could buy a house and have a family. Maybe not in the best neighborhood, but they could do it. Whereas now that's not really a thing anymore. That's not really possible. And
not only is it not a thing, the prices are so preposterous that even if I had a wad of cash, 99.9% of the houses, I wouldn't pay what they're asking for them because it's unreasonable. I might sell my overpriced house, but then I would buy some land with nothing on it and build something, because the market is insane. And so it's impossible for a youngster to crack into such an insane, world at this stage. This is the end stage of their own system, right? I mean, we see it cracking up in front of our eyes. It's not made for the long term, right?
Yeah, so all we can do then, I guess in conclusion, is just we have to be prudent and just look at all the situation, look at the whole big picture, and just think about what will this lead to? If I allow this, or if I take this path, what will it lead to? Will it really cause any long-term harm? Maybe some short-term challenge, but long-term benefit? Things like that. We need to consider, what's good, and maybe ask for advice from other traditional Catholics you trust around you. See what they're doing and how that worked for them, and just have some good examples.
Yeah, no, I mean that's I think it's a good sign of humility and wisdom, right? To lean upon, let's just say I've reached a stage. Now, my father's been dead for 30 years, but if he had lived a normal lifespan, he might have died a few years ago. If I have a question, no reason that I can't ask, somebody else, even reasonably close to my age or just a little bit older that I maybe know from church or whatever, whose opinion I trust, we're not meant to do it alone. Whether it's you're a father to you, you to your children, you to your associates on the left or the right. We are meant to help each other out. Even if it's just with encouragement and words of wisdom.
And so that leads to the next topic of just how bad is it? Are we in the actual apocalypse? Now, I know a few weeks ago we actually talked about the 4 horsemen and all that because they were talking about that hantavirus, and there was the war was going pretty hot and heavy, and there was a prospect of famine. And so it's like, hey, what's going on? It was kind of tongue-in-cheek, though, let's be real. I wasn't saying that the apocalypse was actually in progress. It was just kind of disconcerting about how many of the 4 horsemen were apparently in the saddle at the same time. But let's be real, though. They're talking. A lot of people wonder: has the apocalypse kicked off? Let's put it that way. Are we even started? And could one of the prophecies in the middle of it just happen and come true without the things before it or after it? And let me just read something from the actual apocalypse here. This is from chapter 14. Verse 8. And another angel followed, saying, the great Babylon is fallen, which made all nations to drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Now, we're about to have this 250th anniversary celebration in New York, and some people are worried about what might happen. Maybe we'll have a false flag so that Israel can get their war with Iran, because guess what? Peace is breaking out over there right now. We can't have that. We can't have peace break out. So if Israel wants to be able to wipe out and genocide Lebanon and Palestine and Iran, that won't do. We're going to have to get the Americans in a fighting mood. We're going to have to get some spirit in them to actually fight this battle for us. What's the only way to do that? Because right now, no one cares. No one's willing to fight for them, especially the young people who are the ones just signing up and doing the fighting. So what could they do? Maybe have some kind of destruction happen in New York City, maybe on July 4th, maybe during the festivities of this big 250 celebration.
Could be the 4th.
I can see the argument. It makes sense. But someone was talking about prophecy, both recent, both ancient prophecy, like Nostradamus hundreds of years ago,
sure,
as well as some more recent Catholic prophecy, and even the apocalypse. And he was talking about some of this. This is another Cath Info thread. Yeah. But what I just read to you about the Babylon falling, okay, we can all agree, Babylon, that sounds like New York City. It influences the whole world a certain direction, and always in a bad direction. It's the financial capital of the modern world. Okay, I'm on board that. I'm on board saying that New York City is a good candidate for Babylon. But let's read the next verse. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man shall adore the beast and his image, and receive his character in his forehead or in his hand, he also shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. So, right away, in the next breath, they're talking about the Antichrist. Right. Now, I am firmly believing that the Antichrist is not among us yet. I've seen some wicked men. We got satanic leaders like Trump and Netanyahu and Zelensky. We got some pretty bad guys that are butchering children and carving up children for their organs. That's happening in Ukraine, by the way. Some soldiers came in on it, and they were losing their stomachs. They were.
It has been for ages. For those of you who have been asleep, it's been happening for a long time. And when you say he's not among us, you mean he's not alive yet, or he's not a public figure?
You're right. I'll be precise. I don't know. He could be a child. He could be a teenager, but he's not manifest yet. I have not seen anyone that qualifies as Antichrist.
He could be a grown man.
He's not going to be a bumbling oaf. He's not going to be someone you make fun of. He's going to be diabolically clever. He's going to be very charismatic, very convincing to listen to him. He's going to have diabolical powers. That's the Antichrist. We have not met the Antichrist yet. I'm sorry. So
I don't think is anybody that even pops into Cath Info think that we have.
Well, there's a few. I've seen a few more fringe people have over the years. But I think I'm just trying to remind people out there that, yes, we've had lots of precursors to the Antichrist. I mean, almost every European leader right now is pushing for World War III with Russia. So none of them care about their populations. There's a lot of evil men.
They're all clearly on the script of the Antichrist, right?
Yeah, it's not just there's evil men and there's evil men with power. I mean, even Musk and Bill Gates, they're pretty ominous, but I don't think either one of them is the caliber that you would need for the Antichrist.
Well, no, you have to have a much better personality.
Yeah,
You can't be an old fart. Um, and Trump, the orange man, right? Some people are like, no, you can't have somebody that sets people so on edge. You know what I'm saying? Even before this war, that they
yeah,
call it war, like there has to be something about him that is charismatic and uniting, perhaps in the face of some sort of difficulty, right? Where he can bring peace in a situation that nobody thought he could, but not somebody who sets everybody's, makes their hair stand on end.
yeah. Because again, there's lots of men that are promoting and
Got to
prosecuting.
be reasonably young, vigorous, charming, skillful, all of these things that a lot of these other people who are definitely playing their role in setting the table, they're clearly not the guest of honor, so to speak.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Setting the table. People like Musk or Zuckerberg, they're building data centers. They're building the beast system, you might call it. Yeah. And they're preparing the world for the Antichrist. They would be excellent employees of the Antichrist, but they're not the Antichrist. Let's be real, because the Antichrist is not going to be into WWF wrestling or UFC like Trump was. They're not going to be into Queen or that kind of music. They're not going to be into the level of man. What's coming over your camera there?
One of the, I forget what they call them, like black fly. Maine has certain seasons, where there's certain bugs that are just.
We're going to see like big hairy legs of a fly over the camera.
Yeah, I was like, oh, what is that? Oh, that's a bug.
That would be funny. It would look like you're about to get eaten by a monster or something.
Well, I mean, I'm sure people, you can see them swatting because they're out and about, and actually they usually ignore me largely. Then this still isn't bad. With my wife, they not only love her presence far more than mine, they actually bite her through her clothing. It could be like she'll put on extra things precisely so she can go in the garden and not get attacked, and she still gets attacked. So it's I feel for her. I don't know if my Irish forest helps, keep some of the guys at bay just because they don't want to fight through all that. But
yeah, I'm actually inclined right now to share a little, to share a very classic. Can you see this if I play it?
Yeah, I can see.
And we'd like to. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just lost the picture, but what we've seen speaks for itself. The Corvair spacecraft has apparently been taken over, conquered, if you will, by a master race of giant space ants. It's difficult to tell from this vantage point whether they will consume the captive Earthmen or merely enslave them. One thing is for certain, there is no stopping them. The ants will soon be here. And I, for one, welcome our new insect overlords. Like a Lyman, that as a trusted TV personality, I can be helpful in rounding up others to toil in their underground sugar caves.
There you go.
Yeah, that was.
Yes.
You remember that? You ever see that back in the day?
I did not. I didn't actually watch The Simpsons all that much way back when. I've probably seen more clips in subsequent decades. I think it's still even on live, right?
Yeah, that was what you call classic era. They used to have teams of writers.
I didn't watch it even then. I don't know why. It's no merit of my own. I don't know if it was just because my dad had something.
Again, the early ones weren't as good, like the first year or two, but then like years 3, 4, and 5, that was like.
When did it debut? In the 80s sometime? When did it debut? Sometime
in the 80s? Well, it debuted late 80s. It was like early 90s. Okay. And so I was a teenager, a young adult. I'm a few years younger than you, so maybe that's probably why. But I loved the it was good satire, and it was, now again, it's very anti-religion throughout the whole series, and there's a lot of bad in it. But again, I'm going to give the devil his due here. That was back when they cared about a show. They actually took care for the writers. They hired good writers, and for example. I watched a video breaking down what was good about the classic Simpsons, And they got rid of the laugh track, which was popular at the time in evening, sitcoms and such.
Yeah.
Because what they would do, they'd have a gag, but then they'd have a follow-up and another follow-up. And so it wasn't just leading up to this one gag and then everyone laughs and that's it. And you move on to the next gag. It's like they had this gunk, 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 gunk kind of thing. So you couldn't really have a laugh track. And so in there, it was just one kind of gag after another. And they had so many classics that people are quoting to this day, 30 years later, which kind of shows that it's from a pop culture standpoint. It was kind of, it was.
I don't even know. I doubt I saw it in the actual episode. I probably saw it in subsequent clips. I had a collection of this and that. Speaking of the invasion of all the bugs, there's like 2 of them crawling across the top now. Yeah, I remember. I think it was somebody calling the bar or something, and the bar keeps like,
oh yes, the Mo calling Mo,
Amanda, hug and kiss.
Yeah,
and there were some other ones that were funny too. I can't remember. That's the only one that stuck in my head. Probably a good thing, frankly.
Yeah, last name Jas, first name Hugh. And then the way Mo would say it, one of you has to be a Hugh Jas or whatever. He'd always say it in the worst possible way. I'm looking for Amanda hug and kiss, that kind of thing. And then there was one, I remember there was a Halloween episode where Bart Simpson had powers and he called up Mo. And then Mo said, I have a smelly butt and I like to kiss my butt. And no. It's like he just made him say all that because if he didn't, Bart Simpson would turn him into a, whatever, because he had powers. So that was, but again, but what I understood though, they used to have
circles into the apocalypse. Let's tie it into the apocalypse.
Yeah, let's talk about back to the apocalypse. Yeah.
Tie it in anyway.
So I think that if the apocalypse is going to start coming true, it should come true kind of, close together. It should be kind of
now.
Close.
What are you reading? Because obviously you read a couple of short snippets from Holy Writ, right? The first I think you said was in chapter 14.
Yeah.
Is there a kind of a timeline in your mind that the reader should be aware of as to where this is where it definitively begins? Or could you make an argument, for example, that we are clearly in, because apocalypse is what? Unveiling, revelation, basically.
That's also called Revelation. Well, like chapter 12, the vision of the woman clothed with the sun and of the great dragon, her persecutor. That's probably going on right now. It's
right. That's what I'm saying. It's like you could actually be in the apocalypse without necessarily having hit certain highlights that are specified in Holy Writ.
Yeah. So maybe what I should say instead of apocalypse, I should say end times, the business end of the apocalypse, the part where the 7 seals are broken and the vials are poured out.
I've never heard that.
And the 4 horsemen are summoned up, that kind of thing. Do you really think those are going to happen 10 or decades apart? I mean,
no,
I don't get the impression that they're going to be decades apart.
And I get the impression, frankly, with all the various things that are happening, even any kind of revelation aside, if you just look at like the news cycle for the last few months, things are speeding up, right? Like they are going for the jugular. They're trying to seal the deal on various aspects of their plan, however you want to put it. And so that being said, it would also make sense that some of these other things that do flow from or touch upon revelation, there goes the bug.
Yeah.
I don't know if I spill mustard on there or what, but I don't think so. Clearly those things are going to come into play with greater frequency, intensity, specificity, however you want to say it, where I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of doubt left in the minds of men. And I have long since thought that, although we've made this mess, whether it's you're talking in the world or the church or all the above, we can make a mess. Just like I can make a mess of my soul. Now I can come to God and beg forgiveness, but I don't actually, that doesn't mean that I actually am the one who does the purifying, right? Like I can come to him and ask him to use his divine powers to cleanse me. I kind of feel like where the world is concerned, we've collectively made this fat mess where only he can help us. Which doesn't mean we sit there and do nothing, but like as far as the actual definitive change, which I believe was shared as part of the revelation at Fatima, right? In terms of like the message, like, okay, if you do this thing, I will bring an era of peace, right? We haven't done that thing. I think we will do that thing when we have experienced enough pain, and then God, who is good, will bring about what he has promised to bring about.
I think there's a prophecy to that effect that says the consecration will happen, but it will be late, just like the consecration to the Sacred Heart, which was late. We had to suffer the French Revolution, which you go read about what happened in the French Revolution, how many good people died, how many priests and nuns were put to death and stuff on the guillotine and all the persecution.
Because the king delayed for like 100 years or something, right?
Yeah. And guess what? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So it makes sense that Our Lady would wanting to be like our Lord would almost want it to be that way. If our Lord's was consecration to his Sacred Heart was late, she would probably want hers to be late as well. Then I mean, it's the way God works.
Some of the stuff that Our Lady shared with Sister Lucia, it was in 1929, right? I mean, obviously you had the 1917 thing, but I think some of the things that we're alluding to here were actually communicated in the 29 visit or visits exchange or exchanges, however you want to style them.
Yeah, and then
if you don't know that, I thought that was
that's a whole interesting topic, because I know there was which prophecy was it that predicted World War II, that another, I think it might have been Fatima, talked about another and great war would happen, and there was a sign, and there was in the historical record, there was an astronomical, like in the skies, something very strange. And then I can't remember where I read this. It was fascinating though, because it said that happened, and like it was either that day or the next day, something happened which basically set everything in motion for World War II to happen.
Right.
So it's like just before it happened, God was faithful and gave us the warning he promised, and told the whole world it was about to be punished for its sins with another great war.
It's almost like he's good. He loves us, and what he says is always true. I mean,
here's a question, though.
Is that a fair assessment?
Let's put it this way: wouldn't you say that if World War III happened, that it would be worse than World War II? Like as many people would die, or at least the same or more. Can we agree to that? If that's the case, why wouldn't God give us another warning, like an astronomical, some kind of a thing in the sky, some kind of a warning to show that we're about to be punished with some kind of a chastisement? See, back to the apocalypse thing, or should I say end times thing. Let's again get out the book, Bishop Williamson. What was his take on it? He was very eschatological. He was very much interested in the end times. Sure. But he often said that the apocalypse is not what the events of the apocalypse are not what we're to be looking for. What we need to keep our eyes out for is the chastisement, which will precede it, almost like a dress rehearsal for the end times. Also, the consecration of Russia and the period of peace promised by Our Lady, that will happen after the chastisement. So what we're looking for is some kind of a collapse scenario, war, maybe economic collapse, great suffering, yes, but not the events actually outlined in the book of Apocalypse, because we're not looking for the Antichrist yet. That's going to be for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to deal with. What we are going to suffer is kind of a dress rehearsal for the end times. So however bad this is, I think it could get a lot worse, because, there's a lot of people that don't even think things are bad right now. So you have to imagine a much worse, much more dystopian world, okay? Things could get a lot worse. And
well, they will.
I can imagine it.
I'm well aware that they are pretty darn rotten, but I have absolutely no doubt that they will get a lot more rotten.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not denying any of what's going on right now. I know all the ugliness of the world. Like I said, I heard of stories of like special forces coming into certain parts of Ukraine, and they went into this building and they found like smoking gun evidence. They hollowed out children's bodies where the organs have been harvested. Yeah. And we're talking not just soldiers, but seasoned special forces soldiers, like freaking, like losing it. Like, this is too much for me to see this. And this is what's going on in the world today. And what's going on in Palestine and Lebanon? They're killing babies. There was one case where a drone came in and shot one bullet through the head of a nursing baby. The only people in the tent was a mother and her infant. And this drone came in One
Yeah.
shot of the baby in the head.
I mean, you're talking about the sickest bastards, on the face of the earth. Okay, I believe they were selling T-shirts decades ago with a pregnant woman on it, saying
One shot, two pills.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is who they are. They are the scum of the earth. They're setting up laws right now to make it illegal to even talk about these things, and they're going to come for you in one way or another. You're probably with a drone. One will come up behind me one day during the podcast, and you'll see my brain splatter. But because they don't have the guts to do it face to face, right?
Yeah.
And they don't fight their own wars; they send us. They use gizmos. They're still going to lose, but I mean that you have to grasp that's who we're dealing with. We're dealing with, the scum of the earth.
And it's a lot of evil, but that doesn't mean that we're in the actual properly called apocalypse or the time of the actual end times where we're looking to our Lord to come back again. That there has to be, it would seem, and I fully agree with the bishop, Bishop Williamson on this, that standing between us and the actual end times is some kind of a quote unquote chastisement or punishment from God.
And better period, right?
Yes.
Followed by a resurrection, if you will, of the church. I mean, if you look at the church as reliving basically our Lord's life, which numerous saints talk about that in their works over the centuries, right? This whole idea that the mystical body basically relives the life of Christ, but through time. So, I mean, okay, let's take the last little bit that he was on the earth, right? He was crucified, died, buried, rose from the dead, hung out for a while, right? And then ascended into heaven. So I'm not saying that proves anything. All I'm saying is, I tend to think like the church is in the tomb, so to speak, right now.
Yeah.
There will be a resurrection. There will be a time of great beauty and virtue, but it'll be reasonably short-lived. And then, perhaps some very intense stuff going on, before the ascension, so to speak.
Yeah, I think because again, if everyone converts and there's a great period of renewal, if that were to corrupt, those people would become worse than we are now. I do firmly believe that. I do believe it's possible. You could have things worse.
Something has to happen. You can't have a high virtue moment followed by total chaos unless something, maybe the roots of those beautiful plants weren't all deep enough or whatever. Or maybe it's the fact that all the bad guys right now are building underground cities that are stocked with all kinds of secret technologies, all kinds of food. And I guarantee you it's good food. It's not rice and beans, bro. And it's the good stuff, especially this stuff. If it goes on a recall, a nationwide recall, they're actually stealing it. This is my take, and nobody's ever told me this. That's when they steal massive chunks of who is it? Whole Foods had a whole bunch of hamburger. I'm like, Whole Foods hamburger is not a problem. You guys are just stealing it and having us pay for it. But I could see a thing where a lot of those folks that try and escape the trouble are killed. But I could see where a lot of them also survive with their heart and hearts intact, if you will. And that's who can then also facilitate trouble not all that far down the road.
Yeah, but you wouldn't need it because the devil would still be there and original sin would still be there. So even if the devil's all of his existing army got wiped out,
sure,
just like God can raise up from the very stones children to Abraham, likewise the devil can tempt all the people who are left, and all it takes is one to fall, and he's the new head honcho, and he could start corrupting others, and the old flesh.
Pretty thick.
Think like the internet. Imagine if the internet was wiped out, and we all go to this peaceful time. Everything's great. We're building cathedrals again. Everyone's traditional Catholic, as it were. We would just call it Catholic at that point. But then imagine if someone rediscovered AI and the internet and stuff. Oh, look at this! Isn't this cool? I could see a lot of people hopping on board and trying to revive that and starting. Someone will create TikTok, and then they'll create.
I could see some doing it, but I also don't see it being a necessary thing that all the bad guys are killed before the era of peace.
Yeah, it's not necessary. Yeah, it could be either way. There could be some survivors to spark the next next thing off, you know.
But we'll find out either way, or we won't. You know, I mean, we may find out after we've left this world. You know, I mean,
Yep.
nobody's promised tomorrow, or even the rest of today, right? It's a beautiful day. I'm sitting here. I seem reasonably healthy, but it's not like I didn't give myself existence. I don't keep myself in existence. You know, and frankly, throughout all my years, I've done a lot of things that kind of militated against myself staying in existence, and yet God was kind enough to keep me alive anyway. Um, so every day, every moment, everything is a gift. Um, you know, and are these times hard? Yeah. Does it look like they're quite possibly going to get tangibly, palpably harder in the near term? Sure does. Um, but that doesn't mean that we can't go joyfully into battle and singing the hymns of Our Lady, and maybe we get smacked down pretty hard. Maybe we don't. I don't know. That's our job is to show up, and the victory is hers and God's. If we happen to be allowed to, be alive on the battlefield, so to speak, when it all goes down, cool. That would be a great honor. But if that's not providentially the best thing for us, that's okay too.
Yeah, I think we just have to continue to be prudent and do our best and continue seeking the truth and doing God's will at all times, because whatever God has planned, we have a role to play, either preparing our children and our descendants for the eventual battle with the Antichrist,
Sure.
or just preparing for the chastisement. God's will be done, and whether it's, I think we all have to have generosity, willing to suffer, willing to work, willing to be mortified. Because, for example, whether you're divvying up the work in a household between you and your spouse, you don't want one spouse to have 8 hours of free time and the other spouse to be working from the time they wake up till the time they go to bed. That wouldn't be fair. That's going to breed resentment in one of the spouses, right? It doesn't matter if that's the man or the woman.
We're also going to get in trouble, because fallen human nature is that too much free time is not bueno.
Yeah, that too. So that's how it would come out. But also, every day that you're in that kind of a mismatch,
Sure.
and this goes for parents and children. So if the child has 8 hours of time to play video games all day because you're spoiling them, and the parent is working hard to keep it all running, or the husband or the wife is doing all the work and the other is just kind of goofing off on doom scrolling on the phone, or playing video games or watching TV or whatever their hobby or their vice is, you want there to be some kind of balance so that both the parents and the children, both the husband and the wife, are reasonably matched in how much work they're doing and how much unwinding time. They should both get a little bit of time to unwind at the end of the day.
Sure.
So if
and you also gotta dial it in individually, right?
Exactly. It varies by person.
Like what I can do labor wise is not the same as what my wife can do. It's not just that they're slightly different because I'm a man and she's a woman. It's because my capacity, whatever it is a certain thing, and hers is a certain thing that has individual aspects. And even like what I require for recreation, what she does, how long I need to unwind, or when I do my work. Like working in a restaurant at night is a totally different kettle of fish than a lot of other things. For a lot of people that do what I do, it's very hard to come home. First off, you get home later than most people anyway. A lot of times your spouse is already, my wife's long of it. I spend most of my work week out of town, but when I do come back, or even if I worked right here, my wife would be in bed for hours, but I still have to kind of just unwind and relax, but you got to be careful not to do it in a way that is detrimental to your health, right? Just because she's not there, like I need to unwind, but I need to do it in a way that takes care of myself. Like if I waste too much time with, doom scrolling, like you say, or just interacting with the screens too much too close to bed is a bad idea. Certainly, snacking heavily at night, drinking, blah, 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 all those things. You just got to be smart about it. In recent times, I've just begun to say, you know what, I don't care. I'm just going to bed. Which I go back a few years, I never even tried that. Now I just do it, and it may not be an instantaneous process, but I'm basically like, I don't want to waste time with blue screens, with snacking, with whatevering before bed. I'm good. I just, expending a ton of energy. I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah, so I think we just have to pay attention to our own unique situation, the circumstances,
Yeah.
because there's physical work and mental work. You could come home mentally zonked, but with plenty of energy to do things like dishes or cleaning or whatever.
Sometimes
Or
it's therapeutic to do that kind of
yeah,
mindset.
like
Right?
if you come home from a software development job, you're mentally pretty tired. You don't want to be planning things or thinking, but you don't mind doing some of the physical stuff. Whereas if you work a construction job, you're going to not have much energy. You might be able to help plan things and do the bills or do the pay the bills physically. Do stuff at the computer, but you can't really do a bunch of work because you're tired from work. So you just have to do what works. But I think both spouses always need to work at it, because that's part of the adventure of being married, is finding what works for you too, because you're both from different families, you're both have different expectations, you're both different people with different skills, and then you do different work during the day. What the wife does, wrangling a bunch of kids or homeschooling or whatever, is different than what the man's doing, and there's certain things that need to be done from 5 or whatever till bedtime, and so you got to figure out who can do these different things, and divvy it up fairly, so that, again, one of you is not resenting the other. Because there's I've heard of horror stories, again, about guys who are like, they think it's the 1950s or some kind of caricature of the 1950s where, hey, I'm man, I'm head of house, I sit down on the recliner, give me my cigar, woman, give me my beer, woman, I'm going to sit here and just drink, and watch the TV until bed. You take care of the kids and the dinner and the cleanup and everything. That's a bit crude. That's some kind of a caricature of husband and wife relationship, I think.
Yeah, and you're also wasting your time. And I mean, if you've been paying any attention and what modern media is all about, I mean, if you're gonna expose yourself to good chunks of it voluntarily, don't be shocked when bad stuff follows.
Yeah. So again, I think we just need to continue to be precise and complex in our thinking. Think more deeply. Make a solution that works. Consider things. Don't just follow what you saw on an old movie or or some simplistic view of the world. Try to look at your situation, pray about it, meditate on it, talk with your spouse or your children, and come up with a solution that works for everyone. Because the goal is for all of us to save our souls. And if you raise your kids poorly, that's going to reflect badly on you. If you ruin your kid, that's going to reflect on you. I mean, if you were selfish and your kids end up getting ruined, I'm sure God's going to judge you for that too, because He can see what your goal was, what your motivation was. If you, whether you spoil your children or whether you charge them a bunch of rent, those could each be for selfish reasons.
Right.
And God will see that and know that. And if you ruin them as a result, it's on you. So we should strive, and our goal should be to do what God wants, to be a good father, not just for us or for our own benefit, but for their benefit, for all their siblings' benefit, for the world, for this community's benefit, for the church, and for the glory of God. That should be our goal. So whether that means sacrificing some of your time or some of your money or whatever it is, we should be willing to do it, to do the right thing, to do that, whatever that right thing is. But the trick is to find out what that right thing is. And that's where we have to talk with others, get some advice from our, trusted friends and elders. If we have any, wise elders in our life that we can talk to, and just keep up the good fight, because we don't know how many more years this world has until the chastisement. Who knows when when that will kick off. But we're in this time. We're still in this crisis in the church. We're about to have a big event happen tomorrow. The SSPX is about to consecrate 4 more bishops.
Oh, is that tomorrow?
That's going to kick another gear in the crisis. Whatever happens.
Oh, yeah, I thought maybe it happened yesterday. And the only reason I say that is I know they do a lot of things on
June 30.
Saints Peter and Paul. I just remember that's the anniversary for Bishop Sanborn when he became a priest, and
Yeah, it's always around the end of June or something. Yeah, I don't know why they chose July 1st, but again, I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying really anything about it. I'm just passing over it. What I am saying is, wherever this crisis is going, or however the crisis is meant to develop, I think we're going to develop the next stage. It's kind of like 9/11.
For sure, yeah.
9/11 wasn't a good thing. It was mostly a bad thing, but we know that it moved their plans forward one notch. If there's like a gear and you put the shifter into a different gear, we're shifting into a different gear, because obviously the SSPX is going to they're going to have to get more sold out, or they're going to deceive the people more, or something's going to happen. We're moving to the next level in having these 4 bishops now. So just always keep watching and praying, because we're not out of the woods yet. So I think that's about it for this week.
All righty. Well, it's been a pleasure. I don't know what we want to talk about next week. Maybe we'll touch base after the consecrations and whatever fallout and discussion has taken place now and then.
That might be a good one.
I'd like to discuss at some point in the near future, in a little bit more detail, is the ether. I don't know how much expertise you have on that, but it is to say it's an important topic is an understatement.
Yeah, I could say a few things on it. There's a few things I'd like to say about the ether.
It's also something that has been so successfully suppressed and taken basically completely off of people's minds for over a century that it is shocking. But we'll dig deeper into that next time. For now, keep us in your prayers. We will keep you in ours. And I'm not even sure who the new bishops are, but hopefully everybody will say a few prayers for them, that regardless of what condition they're coming into the process, hopefully they will, be amenable and agreeable and open to receiving, a great increase in light, strength, courage, all the humility, the virtues that they will need to be in. I mean, that's a dangerous position. You're just talking about if you're a parent and your child, what happens with your child is a reflection upon you, and you will be judged for it to a certain degree. I mean, talk about a serious, like becoming a bishop. Whoa, major duties and burden and privileges, but we got to definitely keep them in our prayers, because they're exposing themselves to big time trouble, a fortiori. So anyway, everybody, God bless you, take care, and thank you for watching another episode of the Inquisitors. See you next time.